this button.
Eight.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast that must not be named. I am Luke.
I'm Melissa.
And we are here doing our Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire chapters 16 through 20, 5-chap recap unrestricted section. Of course, this is our full spoiler-filled extravaganza, and on trend for book 4, we have an amazing special guest with us this week. We have our good friend, Evelyn, joining us. Welcome, Evelyn.
Hello, everyone.
How's it going?
It's going. It's flying away.
Yeah.
It's operating.
So, a little behind-the-scenes magic. Evelyn's been one of our probably most avid listeners since the very beginning that I'm aware of. If you can beat her, let us know. We doubt it. But you and Melissa have known each other for quite some time too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Evelyn and I work together, and have traveled together.
Yes, the traveling, that's what sealed the deal there.
It was awesome. But I really think, Evelyn is our number one fan, as in she was the first one.
Yeah. Metaphorically and actual.
Yes.
So let's do a real quick, your Harry Potter story. Like, how did you find the books? Did you find them? Do you watch the movies?
Well, I started because I was teaching middle school French, and my children were literally walking into each other in the hallways because they had their noses stuck in the books. And so kids were crashing into each other walking down the hallway. So I said, let me see what they're reading. And then I became one of those people who was crashing into folks walking down the hallway because my nose was stuck in the book. So I have to say, this is the only fantasy type series that I like. I've tried all the other, well, I haven't tried all the other ones. I've tried quite a few other ones, and this is not my genre by any stretch of the imagination. But I love Harry Potter because it's about the child. It's about his story, and the magic just happens to be the framework that it's in. But I love his story. And so that, and JK's storytelling, she's a master storyteller. And so that's how I got started, was because my students were walking around trying to finish the books. And so then, of course, when all the books were coming out, we were having frenzied stories around school about how far have you read? Don't talk to me. Don't tell me you passed this chapter. I'm going to, somebody's going to get hurt. So, yeah, we did that. And then, of course, we had to stay up all night with the last book and get it finished so that we could have things to talk about when we got back to school that next year.
Yeah, that sounds like a really special way of doing it, kind of having a group. It probably changed over the years, too, of, as the books would come out, you'd have new groups of students coming in, right? Did you keep in touch with some of the ones that you didn't have anymore while it was going on?
No, as they moved on, but they knew, a lot of them knew that we could talk about Harry Potter, or they could come in my room and find the Harry Potter books, or, just different things. Those were different ways that we kind of got in touch, but we didn't really, the ones that started it, we didn't keep in touch over Harry Potter, but they knew that I was a fan.
So one final kickoff question before we get into these chapters here. What's your Hogwarts house?
It's Gryffindor all the way. And I did test myself. I am truly a Gryffindor, not just because I say I'm a Gryffindor.
That does not surprise me.
Although I love Ravenclaw's colors, if I have to be honest. I would want the colors of a Ravenclaw, but I have the heart of a Gryffindor.
I believe that. And I will tell you, listeners, Evelyn and I will sit in staff meetings for our department and throw Harry Potter into things. She's even given me a Harry Potter nickname that nobody else in the room really understands all that much. So it's really nice to have somebody in the room who's as knowledgeable and obsessed with it as I am. So
can we spoil what the nickname is?
Evelyn, do you remember?
I don't. Is it Professor Mathworks? Is that the one I
think you? That's what it is.
Okay.
Yes. So it's off of McGonagall. It was a whole, plus the whole math teacher thing.
Right.
But
so you had to be Professor Mathworks. If you weren't Professor Mathworks, you are now.
Yes, and I believe that's even like on a form, an official form somewhere.
I put it somewhere. It is. It's documented in the annals of work.
It's really funny.
It is amazing when you have like that one person in a room that you know is also a Harry Potter fan, and it's just like we have just this depth of shared knowledge that we could have inside jokes and leave everyone else out, and that is perfectly fine.
Yes.
Even movie watchers wouldn't get it.
Right. There are some things that are book only. So if you don't know the books, just get out of my face.
Kind of, yeah. I watched the movies. Blah.
I mean, I like the movies. I do like the movies, but they in my mind, they are a separate thing. I don't put them with the books because they're just not, they're not the same.
No, it's not the same story.
No.
Different motivations, different everythings, but I digress.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and get kicked off. We are talking about chapters 16 through 20, and that is 16, the Goblet of Fire, 17, the Four Champions, 18, the Weighing of the Wands, 19, the Hungarian Horntail, and chapter 20, the First Task. So this is like the whole introduction to, hey, we need a bunch of champions, we've got a bunch of champions, holy crap.
We have too many champions.
Harry, what am I doing with my life? I'm a champion, and then be a champion for the first time. So, Evelyn, initial thoughts on just this section as a whole?
Well, I think that this part really expresses how children grow up. And so you get to see a lot of just the way kids are in this section. So there's a lot of self-wondering with Harry. There's a lot of doubt. There's confusion. There's just a lot of ideas about how do I fit in. And so I really appreciate how in the midst of all of this grandiose event happening with the Triwizard Tournament, Harry is still a kid. He's still a boy, and he's still, worried about his friends. And then his friends are also trying to identify. And just as a school, there's a whole school pride mentality going on in this part. There are people out there trying to use Harry for their own gain, my beloved Rita Skeeter. So there's just a lot going on in this section that I like, that it's around an event, but it really focuses on kids and that behavior.
I'm going to stop you there. You need to tell us and tell everybody, what's the Rita Skeeter connection?
Oh, I went to a trivia dressed up as Rita Skeeter, Harry Potter trivia, and I did make myself a quick quote quill that looked like it was writing on its own, which was awesome. Magnets are a beautiful thing.
That's awesome.
So my son was thrilled that I had a pen that could write by itself. And I almost won the True Harry Potter or Not True Harry Potter character contest. I got down to the final 3, and I forgot whatever name they said, but it was something I thought sounded true, and it wasn't. So anyway, everybody got to see my fabulous outfit, though, because I was a Rita Skeeter. And I'm still paying for it because we're still finding those feathers all over the house. And that was in February last year. So, yeah. And we've moved houses, so the feathers followed us to the next house.
12 months of feathers.
12 months.
That sounds like a title of a book. 12 months of feathers.
And my son, whenever he finds them around the house, he says, Rita Skeeter's everywhere.
So you had a lot of awesome points there. And the first one that jumps out to me is, the emotional levels that are being dealt with between these children, right? I mean, and Snape, because he's an emotional child too. But but the confluence of all of these characters, these children that are at different emotional maturities, I think is kind of right in the vein of what you were saying. It's, because that's, I think, what causes a lot of the confusion on where do I fit in is because my friends we're developing at different rates, and you lose yourself in that same relationship that you already had, and then one thing changes, and it feels like you're miles and miles apart, which is what Harry and Ron go through, and Hermione is still kind of there in the middle of it because she's going through her own emotional developments at times with this social justice thing that she's going for, and they're on very many different wave paths, and unfortunately the core gets, wavers a bit, but it finds its way back at the end of this section, luckily. But that was something that you said that really I kind of connected with. It made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and the thing I think that's interesting is that Ron has had to deal with his own stuff his whole life because he's, in this huge family, so he's still looking for an identity there. Harry has never had an opportunity to have an identity because the family that he's in just doesn't acknowledge him. And so Hermione has the long view, if you will, in this section because she's the one who kind of grew up the most normal. So she can see the dynamics happening with Ron and Harry that they can't see because they're so in the midst of their own stuff right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I just really like how that whole piece plays out. And I really do appreciate that it resolved at the end of that first task because I would have had to jump in the book and just take Ron out had he continued that foolishness.
Well, and something I've always thought that I really like about JK is that the children are developing and maturing at different paces. And we saw Hermione really hit her like hormonal change, if you will, in book 3.
Right.
With the stress and overwhelmedness. And you can just like, that was an 8th grade and having an 8th grader now. I'm telling you, like, I can see middle school girls, right? Like they're just, that's where Hermione was in book 3. But book 4, it's freshman boys.
Right. Because
boys do tend to mature a little bit later than girls. So it's almost like Hermione's also like, I've been there.
Right.
Get it? Get you through because there's nobody else to do it for you.
Right.
So not that she knows much. She just has like slightly more experience. Like, I am very slight, but slightly more experience
at all. Like is what it is.
Exactly.
She has a unit of experience, a single unit.
Her emotional range is larger than a teaspoon.
Right.
That's right.
Oh, sometimes a teaspoon's all you need,
Is it though?
Don't get worked up so much. But
great.
The other thing that you mentioned that I really, really liked was the dynamic of the school pride and how that kind of goes back and forth and how the Hufflepuffs feel kind of cheated because Harry is in now, and Slytherins be Slytherin. That's what they do. But like consistently, the Ravenclaws are left out. I mean, but
nobody ever mentions that.
Just the dynamic between the 3 different schools. I mean, obviously, like if you're one of 10 students coming from your school, you're probably going to be pretty jazzed about seeing your champion go.
Right.
But I think it's well done that the inter-Hogwarts dynamic plays out what I feel is pretty natural. Like one side feels cheated, and Angelina Johnson, I wish she would have gotten it, but I'm glad she didn't because if I had to pick, I'd choose Cedric Diggory to be dead and not Angelina Johnson. So there's that.
All right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's the only positive for her not getting it.
Right. Although that could have been an interesting story because maybe she would have done something different.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. Fanfic world. There's your next assignment.
Right. That story.
If Angelina had come out of the Goblet of Fire.
Right.
Like, I wonder, ripples, how does that affect the twins going on? How does that affect,
there's so much. One of the questions I always wondered about in that point when they go through that with the port key is why didn't they just touch it and go back? I just didn't get that. Like, why didn't you just grab it back? But I know the story had to go on, but...
I know. Well, and then, that brings up a whole thing we've had about how does a port key really work? Because it seemed like in earlier chapters, the port key was a one-way device.
Exactly.
Or highly time-dependent.
Yes.
Both, basically.
So how does it just randomly be ready to be transported back to Hogwarts when that was not Barty Jr.'s intention to necessarily break? So I have a lot of questions about how port keys work and the consistency of their working.
Yes, but since these were highly unusual circumstances, we will assume that it's a highly unusual port key.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I wondered, because if he was able to get back, why didn't he just go back? but
Right.
perhaps he didn't know that because the one instance where he had, when he used the portkey before, it was a one-way deal. So
Unless that was the highly unusual. Like maybe
Yes.
portkeys are typically both ways, but for the Quidditch World Cup, they were doing it that way because the time difference between travel was who knows.
Yeah, or because they had children with them, and children would touch it, and then the kids would be flying back, and all kinds
Right.
of shenanigans are happening.
I don't know. I
You've
feel
got
like
abandoned children all across the countryside.
I feel like I'm coming around on portkeys not being so frustrating actually with this little conversation we had, because why can't there be multiple types of portkeys? Like they can just be set up differently, and what we saw, it's hard not to see your first experience, your first introduction to something being the standard, right? Like that's breaking that bond of first touch experience is hard to do sometimes, but maybe that was a unique case, that they used it differently than they typically are. Maybe it really is you stumble across it, you pick it up, you go, like that's just what it is. It's just there all the time.
Maybe.
All right,
So I'm
good
gonna
with that. Go for it, Melissa.
All right. So my first kind of note as I was reading these chapters that I wanted to bring up here, it was more of a foreshadowing alert that I noticed. So Bagman Sr., when we're in the Four Champions chapter in the room where everybody's freaking out except Dumbledore, who stayed calm.
Do you mean Crouch Senior?
Oh, you're right. I did mean Crouch. Man,
Okay.
See, it is so a Monday in my world. Okay. I've been like this all day. All right. So when Crouch Sr. is asked his opinion of what to do about Harry's name coming out of the goblet, before he gives his opinion, he's described like this. He looked slightly eerie, the half-darkness making him look much older, giving him an almost skull-like appearance. And then later on in that same chapter, there were dark shadows beneath his eyes and a thin, papery look about his wrinkled skin that had not been there at the Quidditch World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the first sign that something's wrong with him, and this is what it looks like to be under the Imperious Curse.
Yeah.
And I never noticed it before.
Yeah, I didn't notice until what you just said because, I always just kind of run through that part. But exactly, we're getting some hints that something's afoot there.
I'm so glad you brought this point up, because something that jumped out to me in this exact same section is basically it starts with Bagman talking. He says, "Well, shall we crack on then?" he said, rubbing his hands together and smiling around the room. "Got to give our champions their instructions, haven't we? Barty, want to do the honors?" Mr. Crouch seemed to come out of a deep reverie. "Yes," he said, "instructions, yes, the first task." And then he goes on to start doing that. And even a little bit after this, basically Dumbledore, well, where's this line at? It says, there was something specific that it said Dumbledore even looked concerned about Crouch. Oh, come on, it's right in the same area. Okay, there it is. Mr. Crouch turned to look at Dumbledore. "I think that's all, is it, Albus?" "I think so," said Dumbledore, who was looking at Mr. Crouch with mild concern. "Are you sure you wouldn't like to stay at Hogwarts tonight, Barty?" So basically, he's looking at him, and he sees that something's wrong as well. He sees the same things that Melissa just read that the narrator was calling out. And I don't know, do you think Dumbledore realized something was amiss? I mean, clearly he thinks he's not feeling well, minimum. But for how perceptive and magically perceptive Dumbledore is, it's almost like maybe he could tell that there was more than just him being tired involved.
Yeah, Dumbledore's probably already on to him as far as something is not right. But he's waiting to let it play out a little bit to see where he needs to go with that. Because thinking about what we know about Mr. Crouch, in that he's a pretty exacting kind of person in terms of how he dresses. We get all of this exactness about him, but then he called, which just still floors me every time. I cannot say that without laughing. It is hilarious to me. Which we kind of take as him thinking of Percy as just being beneath his level of care, But a person that's that exacting and that precise would not mess up a name like that. So that's also a clue that something's not right here with this guy. And also the way he stumbles over his words. I think Dumbledore probably did know something was up, but he just wasn't ready to take it anywhere yet.
Well, and we see Crouch in a flashback as well, and he is, like you said, he's very precise, he's very deliberate, he's very strong in his convictions and word choice, and like, this is what's happening. But here, where he's supposed to be the voice of reason and the voice of the rule book, isn't even paying attention.
Right. Yeah. Well, that lets us know something's up.
The other thing that, and I actually didn't take it the way Melissa had mentioned it a little bit ago, but like seeing that now, that kind of context of both of those things together, yes, I think there's some sort of either being put on under the Imperious Curse, or, and what I really was looking at when I was reading through this earlier today, it's right after Moody walks in the room and is kind of going after Karkaroff a bit and describes how I used to think like dark wizards, and kind of gives the whole spiel of like, well, this is literally what I'm supposed to do. And it's like after that conversation that he comes out of this deep reverie. So I was almost thinking, again, if you look at like the context clues in the movie itself, which I don't like to do, but like there are scenes where Barty Crouch Jr. as Moody like gives himself away, and Mr. Crouch kind of realizes that at times with the little tongue thing that he sees. And so I was almost like, I looked back at like the verbiage that was used by Barty Crouch Jr. Moody here, and there was nothing that really jumped out at me that would be like, well, maybe he's recognizing like a certain vocal pattern or like something specifically he says. Like there was nothing that really jumped out at me as an option there. But I think the physical description of him looking like he's been imperious, I think is kind of solves that little problem. I was basically, it seemed like he was almost recognizing his son in the room, but didn't realize it. That to me, that was my first initial take of why was he distracted, because his son's in the room. So, but I like the imperious idea too, because we know later on, pretty soon, he starts disappearing. So,
right,
doesn't even make it to the second task. So,
right.
What else you got there, Melissa?
So let's talk about Rita. Lovely Rita. Lovely.
Actually, sorry. We'll get right back to that. I have a note specifically on Moody here as well in that same scene. Moody talking about how once you're selected as a champion, you're stuck. Pretty convenient, eh? It's like he could be as blatantly obvious to this entire group that he is responsible for this, but it's so easily concealed because of the nature of who Moody is. The character that Barty Crouch Jr. is playing is supposed to be, as far as we know, incredibly aggressive and over the top and blatant. And I just think it's so funny that he's literally saying, like, this is what they do, and this is how they do it. This is when they would have the time to do it, and come at me, try to prove that it was me.
Right.
It's just so funny that it's Karkaroff is the one that's like, wow, you seem to have thought about this a lot. He has. He did it.
Right. You're right. I have thought about it a lot. I'm supposed to think like a dark wizard because I am one.
Right. I just think it's so funny, like, thinking of that being Barty Crouch Jr. in that room, the things that he's able to say, it's like the bad guy showing back up at the scene of the crime just to see it. But he's also being like, okay, well, this is how they do it. Like, this is how they would kill that guy out on the sidewalk. Like, it's a little on the nose.
And not that I've ever watched the show, but isn't that like Dexter? Isn't he like the serial killer who's really a cop?
He's a crime scene investigator.
That's right. Him. And sometimes it's like his crime scenes, isn't it? I don't really know. Like I said, I haven't seen the show, but that's what this reminds me of. I think he would have done this, and then probably whoever the bad guy was would have done blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think
it was me.
Kind of speaks to him being arrogant, because he feels like he's so, he's so good at what he's done that nobody's going to catch him anyway. And so he can put all of those hints and clues out there. And probably in his mind, he's a little bit offended that they don't know it's him. But he secretly, of course, doesn't want them to know that it's him. Mm-hmm.
Right. But I also, I agree with you, but it serves his purpose for them to know.
Yes.
I mean, it's better for them to think it's some bad guy than it to be Harry. It's better for them to think that, because then he develops a relationship with Harry as somebody looking out for him so that he can help him out more. It helps him solidify his relationship with Dumbledore. Like, hey, look, I'm here. This is why you have me here.
Yeah.
Well, it validates him as Moody.
It keeps Karkaroff on edge and Snape on edge, hopefully.
So do we think the contract, the binding nature of your name coming out, is that an unbreakable vow of some sort? Like you're both, like, it seems that's the only thing that I can think of in canon that we've seen, that it's like, oh, you make a deal and if you break it, you die. To me, all of the verbiage in this kind of leads to, you can't break it, but what if I do? But you can't, but what if I do? But don't do it, but what happens if I do? Like, they don't say, like, you will die.
Yeah, I took it as maybe it's not as serious as an unbreakable vow, but it's in that realm, only because they took precautions theoretically so that kids would not be harmed severely. So I don't think that someone who didn't participate would be killed, but I do think there's probably something that would happen as a result of them trying to not participate. Probably inadvertently they'd end up having to participate, which is kind of what happened with Harry anyway.
Right. I just picture Marietta Edgecombe.
Yes.
The sneak across her, like coward or quitter, tattooed across their forehead.
I would say maybe they have to take everyone's end of year exams, but Melissa would be really upset if they didn't have to take exams at any more times. So,
well, I'm upset that they're not taking exams in the first place.
I have to take exception to your thought there. I think you came around a little bit in the last one that I listened to, but I think that if you're working this hard to participate in these tasks, you've learned enough that you're showing mastery. So I have no problem with them not taking. I understood your point about the newts and everything. But I do think that this could be one of those qualifiers on your transcript that if you were a Triwizard Tournament champion, that enough in certain realms. So I have no problem with the tournament taking the place of their exams.
Does that mean that since Harry doesn't ever take the newts, it doesn't matter because he was the Triwizard champion?
I mean, he's Harry. Come on.
Right, but I'm saying like now he even another reason.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, so then it's kind of funny that why did he have to take his OWLs? Because he's been a Triwizard Tournament champion. Hello. Been there, done that.
Like, why does he go back to school for the next 3 years?
Well,
2 years.
He lives with the Dursleys. Wouldn't you go back to school?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I'd stay with the Weasleys. Oh, yeah, I'm going to school. But then Ron wouldn't be there. Okay.
Grimmauld Place?
Yes. Yeah, see? He could do that. But then we get into book 5 and Angst Harry. Yeah. That's a whole nother Harry. Right. That's my favorite Harry, but I'm in the minority about
Harry
that.
At all.
I love Angst Harry.
I do like that Harry on his transcript now has a legitimate thing to get a job. Other than that, it's just like, oh, we rumors and stories, and here this is on paper. There were hundreds of witnesses that saw this happen, except for the other 2 tasks. Only the first task does anyone really see.
So that's like bullet points under awards. Bullet 1, Triwizard champion.
No, bullet 1 is I survived Avada Kedavra. Deal with it. Then second bullet,
Triwizard champion.
Yep.
Number 3, chosen one.
Right.
All right, Melissa.
I'm out. Nothing else is written on the resume. It's just those 3 things. That's the whole resume.
Harry Potter, 3 items. You know me.
Right.
I'm that guy.
That's me. All right, Melissa, let's talk about Rita Skeeter a bit.
All right, so Rita Skeeter, her article was completely made up junk. It was, obviously it was not at all accurate to
tabloid
what had happened. Yes. But she was technically correct when she attributed the following quote to Harry. Okay, not that she was correct in quoting him, but she was correct in what it says. And the quote was, "I know nothing will happen to me because they are watching over me." That gets proven at the end of Deathly Hallows when he has the stone, the resurrection stone, and his parents, and at that point, other various dead close friends, are there in spirit, literally watching over him. And Lily was like, yeah, we've always been here. It's a little freaky to me that Rita Skeeter was technically correct on that.
Yeah.
Not that Harry actually said it, but that it was true.
Right. She captured the essence without knowing that's what she was doing. I
making it right.
I love Rita in the worst way. She is so unapologetically just who she is, self-centered and horrible, and do anything to get the story, even if it's not the story that I was supposed to tell. But I do think somewhere down in her core, she's interested in Harry in the right way, but she does all the wrong things. So she just cracks me up. I just find her to be completely ridiculous.
Next story we need written, the Rita Skeeter backstory.
Yes.
Just for Evelyn.
Right. Just for me.
Attractive blonde, Rita Skeeter, 43, whose savage quill has punctured many inflated reputations.
Yes.
I thought Melissa's point when we talked about that line was pretty, I don't know, I hadn't really thought about it, but like, there is truth in that. Like, why would she give her true age, right? So it's got to be what she actually believes. So it's not like she's just writing this and it's making up things just to be awful. These are like the thoughts that she's actually having.
Well, maybe in her mind she's 43, but maybe she's actually 60 or more.
Oh, that's also possible.
Yeah. So for the people out there who are concerned about ageism, I'm not an ageist. I'm just saying maybe she wants to make herself younger.
As opposed to being honest and actually being 43.
Right.
Oh, see, I took her at face value. I didn't.
Yeah, I don't take Rita at face value other than she just values her own face.
This is true. All right. So my next point's about Sirius. When we're talking to him in the fire, the head of Sirius, he assumes that Karkaroff is the bad guy. Is this a false hypothesis based on his limited data, or is it a grudge held over from his past dealings?
I don't think he really has past dealings with Karkaroff other than just rumors of who he was in prison. I don't know if they have much personal relationship specifically.
I mean, they may not, but just knowing who he was and the fact that he was a tattletale and he got out of prison by throwing off names and knowing that was the type of person he was. You know what I mean? That kind of self-serving, do anything to protect himself kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really thought about their relationship. But since I think Sirius values loyalty very highly, I would go with your second thought there that he doesn't care for Karkaroff because of his personality or what he knows of his personality.
Right.
Because Sirius is pretty loyal, and people who aren't, as we know from the experience with Wormtail, he has no value. He places no value in people who don't have some kind of true sense of themselves or some essence of loyalty to the people they supposedly love or care for.
That even if you're supporting the wrong people, at least if you're backing them to the end, but to turn on your own people.
Right.
That's kind of what I was wondering, because is it just based on that, or is it I've heard all these things about him and all this, and he was a Death Eater, so he must still be a Death Eater, and he must. Do you know what I'm saying? If it's just a false characterization, just most people have.
I just don't think it's that, because Sirius always, to me, he works strongly from his emotional beliefs, and just hearing something about somebody, I don't think would give him a reason to have a judgment. But if he knew some things about a person, I think that would play more strongly into what he believes about that person.
Yeah, I think he's using fairly sound character judgment on information he has I guess secondhand from, in his opinion, reputable sources, which is fine. When you're in prison, you're not really going to lie at that point about, well, I'm here because he titled me out. That word's going to get around, around the yard. I don't think they have much of a yard at Azkaban, though. But I just think it's interesting because if you look at, like, from Sirius's perspective, the players that are around Harry that he knows, so just the information that he's got. He's got Karkaroff, definitely used to be a Death Eater. Snape definitely used to be a Death Eater. Moody's there, which is like the opposite, so that's like red flag, something's up. Mr. Crouch is there, who Sirius knows as well, similar reasons, and Dumbledore. So like, there aren't too many other players that aren't just like Hogwarts faculty that would fit the bill of being like, well, who would want Harry dead here? Like, literally everyone else here, by fundamentally who they are in his perspective, should be protecting him. Karkaroff is like the only kind of question mark here. So I think it's fairly reasonable because he knows Snape really well. And I think he knows that Snape wouldn't do anything like this. Fundamentally, even though he hates him, I think he fundamentally doesn't believe Snape would do this.
Not this. He might, be horrible because he is, but he
awful.
won't do that. I would do anything, but I won't
Thanks,
do that.
Meatloaf. But yeah, it's a good question though, and the thought process of like, what if this was Karkaroff? Like, it fundamentally makes sense. Like when you think of where Voldemort was last known to be, and you look at where Durmstrang's school is, like, geography is a factor in it too.
Yeah, but we kind of know that Karkaroff he's a little weasel, and he's very he puts himself first. So I just don't feel like he would be the one to do something like this, because his character flaw is that if there's a problem, he's going to turn tail and run. So I don't think he would have tried to pull anything off like this because there's too much potential for him to get caught. So
self-preservation is his thing.
Self-preservation. There it is.
All right, I'm going to move on to my last thought. Madame Pomfrey is kind of a worrywart.
Yeah.
I mean, she is, right? She has a line. She has a line that says, "Last year Dementors, this year dragons. What are they going to bring into this school next?" But hear me out. In year 5, they bring giants. In year 6, they bring Death Eaters. In year 7, Voldemort shows up. So you know what? She's not wrong. That's all I'm saying. Madame Pomfrey calling it like it is.
She is, but, she's in that protective mother hen mode. So it could have just been a funny shaped leaf and she would have been all upset.
Right? So, I mean, she's very much the school nurse of just like caring for everybody. But I just found it funny that it hit me just right. Technically, there really has been.
It does continue to get worse.
Right.
It really does.
Consistently.
And probably she's been there long enough, probably over the years, to see some kind of trend happening.
Right.
She's got her plot points.
Right.
Trend. There's a through line.
Oh yeah, she's got her trend line. She's figuring out the regression, the linear regression.
We have enough data points to see if there's been progress made.
Right. Wonder what it's looking like now with Harry's kids in school and everything. Where's the line now?
Well, so Albus would be a second year, and James would either be a third or a fourth year right now. So yeah, it'd probably be creeping up again. Says she's retired.
Right, perhaps. I don't know. They kind of hang around. Dumbledore's been there forever. He's 150 or something, or he was.
He was, yes. So yeah, I mean, she could still be there. Who knows?
He might still be there.
All right, Luke. Any other thoughts before we move on to our superlatives?
Just I want to get Evelyn's thoughts on the, and I quote, "He asked calmly," compared to the movie where. Basically, this is when Dumbledore comes in and asks, Harry, "Excuse me, Harry," very politely, demure, "did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?" As opposed to rushing in and essentially screaming at him. I just wanted to get your take on that. That's always been something that, when I first saw that in the movies, I lost all respect for the movies at that point.
And I almost, in my mind, I walked out of the movie at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I do not like the person who took over. I'm so sad that the other guy died.
Richard Harris.
Yes, he had the essence of who Dumbledore really was. And the other guy, because I know no names, but
Michael Gambon.
He was just too much. He was too short. He was too thick. He was not wise enough. He was not Dumbledore to me. So when he came in there and shouted at Harry,
grabbed him by the arm.
At a moment when none of that would have happened by the real Dumbledore, I'm with you. I did not care for that scene in the movie. It just was not right.
It felt like character assassination to me. It's like you're totally undercutting like the fundamentals of who this character is. Like this isn't going to get him riled up. Like he's the guy that's been through some stuff, right? I mean, that's like you always get that because he's above it. And this was like, oh, well, this is like the biggest thing that he's ever seen before. Like what?
Right. And then and we know that Dumbledore's in Harry's corner, so he would have never accosted him publicly like that. So that I am so with you. It was completely wrong.
Because if he actually thought Harry had done it, he would have asked, is there something that I should know?
Right.
Yeah, he would have given him the opportunity, not berated him.
Or he would have done it privately. I mean, there's just lots of things about that scene that were just completely wrong. Mm-hmm. So I agree. It was a bad deal.
Well, I'm glad I am not completely alone, and I know that I'm not. That's a bad one. But
you're not alone.
Melissa has some burning questions for you.
Oh boy.
Okay, here we go. So, thinking of Beauxbaton and Durmstrang, it says that there are barely 20 extra kids. Is that a reasonable amount for each school to have brought only about 10 kids each?
I think so. I mean, if you're going to bring the best of your best, 10 kids sounds good to me. I wouldn't have brought more than that. There's too many opportunities for goofiness to go down with other children. And, we know what teenage children are like. So, yes, I think 10 would be a good number.
So not really one of my questions, but a follow-up. How do you think those 10 were chosen?
That is an excellent question because I don't know. I never really even thought about that. My guess would be that they had some kind of tournament of sorts, or they were the top of their class, or they were the ones who volunteered. I mean, we know Crumb has really good Quidditch skills, so we know he's a talented wizard. And so we have to assume that would be the case for the others. So I don't know.
I just think that they probably were more invested than any of the Hogwarts students of the same age because they already had to go through a process to even get to that point.
Right.
So that was my follow-up.
I want to float one theory out there that I just thought of. So the 3/4 Triwizard champions are selected by the Goblet of Fire, titular to the book. What if each school has their own teacup of fire or something?
That picks the best 3, or just the schools that will be traveling has something like that.
He sends just a little, adjoining teacups to, you guys need to pick your top 10, save on some, travel expenses. I don't know. I think there could be.
So, if it's hosted at Beauxbaton next time, then Hogwarts will get a flaming teacup?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a group of 3. There must be 3. It's not Highlander.
But I don't think the other one needs to. The host school doesn't need one.
Right. There are 3 total cups. There's the 2 teacups and the goblet. It's a set.
Then does the teacup travel between schools? Because one of them's always going to be moving around somewhere. Well, they're always going to be moving.
Much like the Olympic torch.
Yeah, I think afterwards they all 3 convene again and then get all brought out and sent to the correct ones.
Okay, so
in this working theory,
somewhere, and then at the point of the tournament, there's the sisterhood of the traveling teacups.
Right. It's got to be in Switzerland that they keep it, right?
Oh, that's something.
All right, question number 2, which goes along with this topic. Per Karkaroff, do you believe that Durmstrang will actually boycott the next tournament?
No, only because we know how this one turned out. I wonder, though, if Kakarov had survived, would they have boycotted? Perhaps, or he would have just been the voice of angry, you know what happened the last time. We shouldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
But can they not go because it's a binding deal with the Tri-Wizard? It has to be 3 schools. Well, we know there was a 4th with this insanity that happened this time. But
Right.
but if there has to be 3 schools, can they get out of it? I don't think so.
Or do they just say, okay, we'll invite another school?
That's possible, but I'm wondering if this Tri-Wizard tournament has such great history between those 3 schools that it's exclusively their tournament. Perhaps there's a Tri-Wizard tournament for the US, Canada, and Mexico. Perhaps there's a Tri-Wizard for the Western countries in Africa. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Each continent should have their own.
Right, they could. So,
And then they could have like
The
a
Intercontinental
world
Champion.
Tri-Wizard, a Hept Wizard, because you get one champion from each. Well, I guess it would be a Hex.
Hemi.
It would be a
Oh, the-
Hex, though, because Antarctica wouldn't have one. So
Oh, don't leave them
Hex is the
out.
wizard
one.
continent.
They have to have one. Even if the
But they could-
attendance might be
I think
low.
That would be like the semifinals because since it's Tri-Wizard, it would have to be Tri-Wizard all the way down. So maybe when all of the different continents compete, that's the level 1, and then the finals is the Tri-Wizard. So the top 3 from the continents.
Oh, you could do that, especially if Antarctica doesn't have one. You could have,
That's the
3
battleground.
continents here,
Yeah.
3 continents.
Right.
That's where it happens.
Yeah. They battle on Antarctica.
We'll see you in the Antarctic.
Dun dun dun.
Get your
All right.
tickets now.
And your warm clothing.
Dress warm.
Well, the first task is just getting there. Like if you show up,
You made
You
it.
are in.
Good. That's a good start. Australia, you only get half points because that was not that hard for you.
right. And if you come from Chile, I mean, you just jumped across the pond.
Yeah, Cape
Or if you're
Horn.
living in South Africa,
Yeah.
it's just a boat ride.
Yeah, I mean it's not far, so they don't get to participate. Perhaps maybe they have to climb a mountain
Maybe.
first, and
It's all
then
flu powder anyway.
I'm really picturing some sort of wizarding amazing race at this point.
that
There's
would
the
be
fanfic
awesome.
that we need.
There, yeah, I would read.
Put it on
that
the
one.
list.
I
We do need
would-
a running list.
We do. That means I'm gonna have to go back and listen to every time I've ever said, "Hey, fanfic,
Hey,
write me
assignment
this."
for you.
Okay. Question number 3. I feel like I'm asking the expert on this one. I'm very excited.
Oh God, don't set it up like that.
Oh no, it's good. Trust me, you'll like this. How does a quick quotes quill actually work?
It's magnets. No, I think a quick quotes quill is it's a great summarizing tool. So like there's a summarizing charm involved. And so it just captures the essence of what a person says under normal circumstances. Now, Rita, I think, added a lovely filter to hers so that it says what she wants it to. It summarizes what she wants it to summarize. So it's taking, as opposed to taking what was just said, it is taking it through the filter of how she would interpret the statement. So I think there's a summarizing charm involved.
Okay, but hers is maybe linked to her thoughts as
Yeah.
opposed to linked to the sound in the room.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, I guess that she would have to like thinking of this as like a computer, like as what it's doing, right? Like she would have to go in and like change the code, the magical
Right.
code of it to filter through her like as she's thinking it, or just
Yeah.
like an auto predictor, like this is how she typically writes.
Yes, all of that. It's like Google. It just gets smarter with you every time. So
Yeah.
her filter just got smarter with her, and it kind of knows how she writes and what she thinks and how she believes and how she interprets statements, and it just filters down to how she would say it.
So just over time, as she's been using this and assimilating to it, and it basically both ways, like she realizes how it writes a little bit, and they kind of work together, and she edits afterwards, and it gains that knowledge of like, oh, corrections. So
Right.
the next time it has even more, interlaced thoughts with how she would do it. But
Yeah, and it may not even need to even edit. She may not need to even edit anymore at this point because
right,
she's
it's
done
so
it so much
attuned.
that poor Quill is probably maxed out on Rita Skeeter thoughts.
I like that.
Okay, question number 4. Could the stress and emotional distress that Harry is under in chapter 19 be blocking him from learning the summoning charm?
It could be. Harry doesn't. He does not do well under pressure. Sometimes, he does, and sometimes he doesn't. And I think this is a case where he was so determined about what he had to do in terms of just getting to the point of doing the thing that he didn't really think about how it was going to help him and how he was going to work through the using that charm. Like he was just on the point of, I have to get this charm down. I have to get this charm down, and not really thinking about, okay, the first step is getting the charm down. And then the next step is really thinking about how I'm going to use the flying, because once he got into the tournament and he starts to fly, then that's the point where he relaxed and realized, hey, this is just kind of like Quidditch. He was so caught up in the moment of trying to make sure that he could do the charm that he just, I think he overthought it initially. But I also think that J.K. as a brilliant writer had to build that little bit of suspense and tension in there for us, because then we're all wondering and worried about whether or not it's going to work, even up to the point of us not being sure it was going to work until it did.
Mm-hmm. That waiting for the broom to come zooming
Right.
in. There is that,
Yeah.
even he's like, oh, what if it doesn't work? And I just stand here
Right.
looking like a total idiot. Like,
Right.
what do I do then?
Right.
Try again?
And then that brings us back to, like, does that count as participating and then I walk away? Like, I showed up, I tried a thing, it didn't work, I'm out.
Right.
I don't know. I kind of wonder, like, maybe you do. Maybe he stands there for his time, because it was a time, there was some time involved.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if they had a maximum amount of time allotted, and then if his time had ran out, well, you're in last place, but you showed up, so move on.
You survived. Good job.
Right.
Right. Okay, last question. Which dragon would you choose to face?
Oh gosh, give me the names again. I don't remember this stuff.
Of course. So we have...
The Hungarian horntail, I know that much, and the Chinese fireball or something.
Yep.
Yes,
And the
the
Swedish...
common...
Go ahead.
The common green Welsh.
Uh-huh.
And the
And what was the other one?
Swedish short snout.
Yeah, I think I would have gone with the Chinese fireball, mainly because I think that's an awesome name, and that's one of the ones I remembered.
You have to pick one.
Done.
I can say this one's name because I
Right.
remember it. Okay, that's what you get.
That's it. There it is.
That's an
my
honest
job.
answer.
Excellent. Okay, so the other thing we ask all of our guests is, who was your section MVP?
For the section,
Mhm.
oh boy, I should have thought about this beforehand. I hate to have to give it to Harry, but that's kind of where I'm headed. You know what? I'm not going to give it to Harry. My section MVP is going to be the Weasley twins, because they supported Harry right off, and they went on. I mean, they gave the boy a party. They were all excited for him, and it was obvious that something had happened, but they were going to make the best of this situation and try to support Harry and buttress him up. So I'm going to give it to the twins.
Luke, that falls under your working theory of the Weasley twins are the best friends Harry could have ever had.
They are. There are so many times, and like book 2 was a big one where everyone thought that he was the heir of Slytherin, and they were just like, heir of Slytherin coming through, watch out everybody. Like, it's just so consistently they are
so good at diffusing tension, and
everything around Harry is incredible tension.
Yeah. And they just make the best of it. And then they also bring the others along, which is the other thing I like about them. So Lee Jordan is automatically a friend because they're friends with with the
Right.
twins. They're friends with Harry. The Gryffindors in general could have probably had a little feeling towards Harry one way or another, even though they're in the same house. But the twins sort of become that buffer for him. So I think I'm with you. I had never really thought about them being the best friends he could have had, but I'm going to agree with that one.
I think they set the PR tone, right?
Yes.
They do all the public relations.
Yes,
and
they are
that is what Harry needs, especially later on when like even the newspapers are going after him. And he's like, what? I just died almost again. Like, I'm being put on blast? Like, what is going on?
I just think of the twins as like that kid in your class who, even though they don't try, they hold all the social power.
Yes.
All of it. And sometimes that kid can use it for some years, that kid uses it for good. And some years that kid uses it for evil. And they're ones who tend to use it for good for the most part until book 5, in which case it's still for good against
It's better.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just talk about the swamp for a minute?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that is one of my favorite scenes. And I love how even who was the teacher? I can't remember. That had to admit good piece of magic. The one
was it Flitwick?
Flitwick.
Oh,
yeah, he had to just go on and acknowledge these boys have some skills. I love that scene. And then of course when they blow up the whole testing area. Oh my gosh! Oh boy, I love that. I love that whole thing. And like they were like, we're gonna kick this thing. Watch it. Watch and learn.
All right. So then my only other question for you is, do you have a favorite line or favorite moment from this section?
Yes, and I am going to read it to you if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right. It's the very last part of chapter 20, and it starts off, it was Rita Skeeter. She was wearing acid green robes today. The quick quotes quill in her hand blended perfectly against them. Congratulations, Harry, she said, beaming at him. I wonder if you could give us a quick word. How you felt facing that dragon. How you feel now about the fairness of the scoring. Yeah, you can have a word, said Harry. Goodbye. And he set off back to the castle with Ron. There's some cursing that I want to say because I want to interpret that the way I would have responded to her. But I know it's a family-friendly show, so I'm going to keep those words in my mouth. But you know what I'm thinking. And it's a bitch. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's such a great moment. Anything that Harry, like whenever Harry has a really good comeback, and he has a few, not a lot and not often, but there are times where he's got good comebacks. And I like to attribute that to years of training under Vernon Dursley.
Years of abuse and experience.
Yes. But Vernon does have some good ones. So Harry, he learned from the best, even though it was under a horrible circumstance.
Exactly.
Because the fact is, he still learned. He took a positive from it.
He did. He took a bad situation and made something good out of it.
Yeah, good on you, Harry.
I love how he just shut Rita Skeeter down just completely right there.
All right, well, I think that's pretty much going to wrap us up for today. Evelyn, this was so much fun. Like, I don't think we've laughed this much on an episode in a while. So, truly, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening along and sending us your thoughts along the way as well.
Thank you. I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
So until next time, you can find us on social media, on Twitter at NotNamedPodcast. Send us a digital owl at notnamedpodcast@gmail.com. Find this and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com.
Subscribe, like, and rate us on iTunes. Leave a review or leave a comment. You can also find us on YouTube. Go ahead and start following us on YouTube because right after this, in fact, even before this, because we work a little ahead, we are going to start live streaming all of our chapter by chapter recordings. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so that you can be notified every time we are live recording the newest chapter. Also, listen to this Not Named podcast on Radio Public. It is free, easy to use, and helps listeners like you find and support shows like ours. When you listen to our show on Radio Public's Android or iOS app, everyone benefits. Patreon listeners, we appreciate you following us here. Make sure you check us out next week when we release chapter number 21.
The House Elf Liberation Front. stay imaginary.
Thanks.